is up, folks, and welcome to episode 4 of the Digital Dopamine Podcast. Today, we will be discussing the Coruna iOS exploit and other major issues that come with the commercial surveillance industry, which is an industry that I'm learning more and more about as the time goes on because cyber warfare is becoming more prevalent in today's world, and it's something that I think that we all should be aware of and have a little bit of information about this industry and how they operate. So we can dive right into it in terms of what the Coruna exploit is. So the Coruna iOS exploit framework is a new and powerful exploit kit targeting Apple iOS devices, mainly the models still running iOS 13, which was released in September 2019, and up to iOS version 17.2.1, which was released back in December 2023. Now, this also affects certain iPad versions, certain Mac OS versions, but the main target has been iOS, so mobile devices. And this was initially identified by Google Threat Intelligence Group, or for short, GTIG, and iVerify. The exploit contained 5 full iOS exploit chains and a total of 23 exploits within that kit. And the core technical value of this exploit kit lies in its comprehensive collection of iOS exploits, with the most advanced ones using non-public exploitation techniques and mitigation bypasses. GTI has been tracking this exploit since 2025, and at first that kind of threw me off a bit because while this exploit was in the wild, not many people knew about it. And while Google was monitoring this exploit and building a report for it, the civilians or the population that are probably mostly affected by it are not aware. So that poses a problem in my eyes. And I think that we should have more actively managed articles or reports being updated throughout the year that they're monitoring. That way, people who are interested in figuring out what this is and how to maybe educate their group of people or their social circle about how to stay safe. I think that would be better for us as humanity. So there's another report that Google had released back in August 29th, 2024, and it states, today we're sharing that Google's threat analysis group, so that one is TAG for short, observed multiple in the wild exploit campaigns between November 2023 and July 2024, delivered from a watering hole attack on Mongolian government websites. So that's a big problem, and I have the report attached to this article. Now, I'm still new to cybersecurity and threat intelligence, so I don't know if there are procedures around exploit discovery that require monitoring to understand them before they release the reports. To be honest, that kind of makes sense as, I say it out loud now. So maybe there's some truth to that assumption, and maybe there is a good reason why they don't quickly release reports as soon as they discover an exploit in the wild. They have to study it a little bit more to see the true effects and the true harm that it could possibly do. And these specific campaigns first delivered an iOS WebKit exploit affecting iOS versions older than 16.6.1, and then later a Chrome exploit chain against Android users running versions from M121 to M123. These were in-day exploits for which patches were available and released, but would still affect against unpatched devices. So if you haven't made any upgrades or an iOS update or a phone update, whatever software you're using, if you haven't made an update recently, then you would most likely still be exposed to being attacked. Not that you might have, not that you're targeted per se, but you have that vulnerability still exposed. So they assessed that with moderate confidence, the campaigns were linked to the Russian government-backed actor titled, but this is the title of the actor, APT 29. This leads me back to the Corona exploit itself because it seems like security vendors that are government backed have increasingly become more and more careless with who they sell the exploits to. And if you didn't know already, there is an entire industry of companies and security vendors that are selling these exploits not only to the governments that back them, but also to other brokers that are not as moral or ethical when it comes to how they then resell the exploits. And it's becoming more and more common that once the exploit or the spyware capability is sold, control over the end customer is lost. Brokers can't be trusted with these capabilities, and business to business transactions over spyware markets are highly unregulated. Now, this lack of control helped launch discussions about responsible use of spyware and aligning on a formal voluntary framework for its use called Pall Mall process. And I have a link to that proposal in the article as well. But those discussions are ongoing, and the economic pressure for spyware companies to return a profit means that these tools are being sold to a broader array of organizations. Some things just shouldn't be based on the constant need of an investment return. And this is my issue when it comes to how capitalism works in our modern society. I don't think that capitalism was all bad. Competition breeds innovation. But when it comes to modern day capitalism, it is not efficient. It has become corrupt and has become very toxic and has become depraving of humanity. So there needs to be a change in how we move forward when it comes to businesses and what their end goal is. But that's capitalism for you at the moment. So it's just getting sloppy when it comes to handling these exploits because people are constantly reaching for profits, and they will just sell it to any other broker that might not have the moral standing of I don't even want to say the moral standing of the government, because the government is pretty lacking of morality as of the last couple decades. So surprisingly, though, Google is, at least this side of Google, not all of Google, this specific side and this specific department and team of Google has been on the forefront of reporting this slippery slope when it comes to the unchecked commercial surveillance industry. And there's a great report that you can read. It's called Buying Spyware, and it's a PDF that I have attached to the article. And I highly recommend the read regardless of your interest in cybersecurity, because whether you like it or not, these leaks or unethical sales of spyware affect us all. So I want to elaborate on the definition of a couple of these exploits that should give maybe a broader understanding of what they are and like what I'll be talking about throughout this article and throughout this episode. So the first one is a zero-day exploit. So a zero-day is a vulnerability or security hole in a computer system unknown to its developer or anyone capable of mitigating it. Until the vulnerability is remedied, threat actors can exploit it in a zero-day exploit or zero-day attack. The term zero-day originally referred to the number of days since a new piece of software was released to the public. So zero-day software was obtained by hacking into a developer's computer before release. Eventually, the term was applied to vulnerabilities that allowed this hacking and to the number of days that the vendor has had to fix them. Vendors who discover the vulnerability may create patches or advise workarounds to mitigate it, though users need to deploy that mitigation to eliminate the vulnerability in their systems. Zero-day attacks are severe threats, and there are other attacks that we will discuss, and I will post a screenshot and show the different terminology of certain X-day attacks. So there's zero-day exploits, and there's N-day exploits, and then there's one-click exploits, and there's zero-click exploits. So I can go into a few of those definitions a little later on, but we're going to talk about the watering hole exploit next. So the watering hole is a computer attack strategy in which an attacker guesses or observes which websites an organization uses frequently and then uses one or more of those websites to distribute the malware. So eventually, some members of the targeted users will become infected. Attackers looking for specific information may only target users coming from a specific IP address. This also makes the attacks harder to detect and research. The name is derived from a strategy of predators in the natural world who wait for an opportunity to attack their prey near watering holes. That attack strategy was named in an RSA blog in 2012. So these are just two of the many different types of attacks and exploits that threat actors use to gain confidential information or credentials from their targets. If you're interested in learning more about common attacks, you can check out an article from Fortinet that I have a link posted here where they go over the 20 most common attack exploits. And then when it comes, like I said, when it comes to different key terms of exploits, end-day exploits, I can explain really quickly that those are exploit that uses a publicly known vulnerability. Then you have the one-click exploit, which requires at least one interaction or click from the targeted user, such as clicking a link or opening up a malicious document. And then you have zero-click exploits, which are really dangerous, which requires no interaction from the targeted user at all. And there are a few more key terms that we'll be going over later when I discuss the exploit chain as a whole and how this specific Coruna exploit kit was used and created. So the initial discovery and the commercial surveillance vendor role is what we're going to touch on next. In February 2025, GTIG captured parts of an iOS exploit chain used by a customer of a surveillance company. The exploits were integrated into a previously unseen JavaScript framework that used simple but unique JavaScript techniques. The framework starts a fingerprinting module collecting a variety of data points to determine if the device is a real device and what specific iPhone model and iOS software the version is running on. Based on the collected data, it loads appropriate WebKit remote code execution. So that's RCE in short, followed by a pointer authentication code, PAC for short, bypass as seen by the figure 2 I posted on the article here. So at the time, GTIG recovered the WebKit RCE delivered to a device running iOS 17.2 and determined it was CVE 2024 CVE code 23222. So that touches base back on kind of what we discussed in my last Try Hack Me episode or Hack With Me episode when I was going through my Try Hack Me module to where a specific database, the CVE database, I was able to use and look up this exploit. And they have a report that Apple published for this specific exploit on that database so people can look into the origins, I would say not necessarily the full origins, but the time that it was exposed and then the time that they released a patch. So the vulnerability previously identified as a 0-day from Apple, and they posted it on January 22nd, 2024, and they didn't credit any external researchers, which is a little bit weird because I feel like the other researchers that discovered this should have gotten the credit for it, aka Google and iVerify. But the image I have posted on this article that I'm going to show up on the screen shows the beginning of the RCE exploit and exactly how it was delivered in the wild with GTIG's annotations. And as you can see, the obfuscated constants, then you see the utility functions, and then you can see the trigger for the CVE ID. So now, again, going to throw in a little shameless plug to my last episode of Hack With Me, which was episode 2, search skills. And again, we go over the ways that we can look into these exploits and get a little bit more of information about when they were discovered, how they were discovered, and what was done to remediate the issue. Because I used one of the special databases I learned about, which was the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures database, to pull up the record of this exploit, I just want to add that you can see here what Apple had posted, and shows the devices that were exposed and affected with this exploit, which again was iOS 17.3, or I should say it was fixed after the specific releases for iOS 17.3, iPadOS 17.3, and Mac Sonoma 14.3, as well as tvOS 17.3, which surprising that people are trying to attack tvOS. The latest update on the record here states that it was 2024, June 12th. So I'm not sure if that was when the OS update came out or if that was when the last fix forward from the initial release of the OS patches came out. As in, they could have patched the exploit to immediately remediate the issue, but then maybe release another update to further strengthen that remediation to make sure they were ironclad in terms of fixing that vulnerability. So either way, most people I can assume are safe from this attack moving forward, but there are apparently still many users within the US and outside of the US who still have an older version of OS for one reason or another. And I have no idea why certain people don't upgrade when they can, but there are specific reasons I'm sure that people decide to hold off on their updates. So let's now talk about the Corona exploit kit and how it's in the wild. And this is the bigger issue of this piece, is because it's the fact that these exploits that are being funded and built for the government, for not just our government, but for government entities, should be concerning to us all when they are being leaked after they're being sold to the wild. So Google's report doesn't explicitly mention the original CSV customer that deployed Coruna, but iVerify, which also analyzed a version of Coruna it obtained from one of the infected Chinese sites, suggests that the code may well have started life as a hacking kit built for or purchased by the U.S. government. Google and iVerify both note that the Coruna contains multiple components previously used in a hacking operation known as triangulation that was discovered targeting Russian cybersecurity firm Kaspersky in 2023, which the Russian government claimed was the work of the NSA. So that's the National Security Agency. The U.S. government didn't respond to Russia's claim, and if they didn't respond to Russia's claim to deny it, their their hands are dirty in this situation. And I think that they were truly the reason that it got leaked. Because you can be damn sure that if we didn't have any involvement in triangulation, that specific exploit, we would have made that known loudly. So iVerify also noted that the code appears to have been originally written by English-speaking coders, saying it's highly sophisticated, took millions of dollars to develop, and it bears the hallmarks of other modules that have been publicly attributed to the US government. They also added that this is the first example we've seen of a very likely US government tool, based on what the code is telling us, spinning out of control and being used by both our adversaries and cyber criminal groups. So here we are again, another extremely sophisticated exploit leaked by the US government. And I say another because this isn't the first time this has happened. A lot of you might know about this one because back in 2017, Eternal Blue was a Windows hacking tool stolen from the NSA. Again, them allowing exploits being siphoned from there, allowing them to be leaked. And it was leaked into the world, leading to its use in catastrophic cyber attacks, including North Korea's WannaCry, which is the one I think a lot of people might know, and Russia's NotPetya attack. We can most certainly expect something of the same caliber to be developed and deployed over the next couple of years when it comes to the Coruna exploit being released into the wild. It's only a matter of time. And even Google stated, beyond these identified exploits, multiple threat actors have now acquired advanced exploitation techniques that can be reused and modified with newly identified vulnerabilities. So this exploit, this Coruna exploit, is now in the wild and in the hands of cyber criminals. Now, over time, they're just going to continue to increase the capabilities of this exploit, modify it, make sure that it is no longer, make sure that these patches no longer make certain devices safe because they're going to get around some of these patches that went through to prevent this issue from spreading further than it already has. And I guarantee you can expect a bigger attack to be put in place over the next couple years that stems from this particular exploit. So the loosely regulated industry is a problem within itself. iVerify's co-founder Rocky Cole points to the industry of brokers that may pay tens of millions of dollars for zero-day hacking techniques that they can then resell for espionage, cybercrime, and cyber war, which, as people know, that we are in a conflict in the Middle East, again, on behalf of the government entity that we claim is supposed to be our ally. I'm not going to say the name so I don't get censored because they've been censoring people heavy, but you all know who I'm talking about. And the fact that cyber war is a main part of this conflict that a lot of people aren't talking about. We all see the kinetic fallout from the war that's going on, but nobody's really paying attention or making note of the cyber war that's going on. And this leak of an exploit can only inflame the problem that we have when it comes to trying to prevent more widespread issues of these exploits. Now, notably, Peter Williams was an executive of a U.S. government contractor, Trenchant. He was recently sentenced to 7 years in prison for selling hacking tools to the Russian zero-day broker Operation Zero from 2022 to 2025. Williams' sentencing memo notes that Trenchant sold hacking tools to the U.S. intelligence community as well as others in the Five Eyes group of English-speaking governments. So that's the US, the UK, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. So they are just double dipping in contracts and reselling these dangerous toolkits to whoever is willing to shell out the most money or shell out extra money for them. You can imagine how slippery the slope can actually get. So now we can go a little bit deeper in the technicalities of it and discuss what spyware kill chains are. Here's a good example of what exploit chains are and the reason that these are the main ways an attacker tries to succeed with their spyware. So as the security design of devices has progressed, attackers have to use exploit chains rather than a singular exploit to remotely install spyware onto the target's device. An exploit chain is made up of several exploits chained or linked together and often includes 3 or 4 different zero-day exploits. Generally, the exploits fall into 3 types: initial remote code execution, RCE, sandbox escape, SBX, and local privilege escalation, LPE. Information leaks are sometimes used to help with these exploitations within the chain as well. For spyware to be successful, it has to gather data without alerting the user. Government customers want to gather data from a user's device, such as reading messages on their phone or accessing their browser history. However, by design, a single application on a mobile device does not have the privileges needed to access all other applications or data on the device. Each application requires the user to explicitly grant permissions to access that data. Otherwise, any downloaded game would be able to access all messages or even browser history of the device. This barrier between applications is referred to as a sandbox. An application requesting permission to access data could alert the user to unusual activity and possibly reveal the presence of the spyware. Instead, CSVs have to exploit vulnerabilities in the device to break out of the sandbox and gain additional privileges. Technology companies have added additional layers of security to increase the difficulty of that exploitation. Installing spyware and accessing all the data on the device requires the highest level of privilege, referred to as root privilege. Exploit chains often contain local privilege exploits to gain access to the root privilege needed to install the spyware and access the user's data. So here's a good visualization of how the exploit chains or spyware kill chains work from top to bottom. The first step is delivery to the targeted user. So attackers deliver the initial exploits to the targeted user via a variety of different methods, such as sending a link via SMS, using a zero-click exploit, performing a network attack, or convincing the user to install a malicious app. The next step would be the exploitation step, which attackers use exploits to gain the required access to install their spyware, such that the spyware can access all data on the device. Initial remote code execution, sandbox escape, local privilege escalation, which were the three main tools or the main methods used in in spyware kill chains that we had mentioned earlier. The third step is the installation of the spyware. So once the attacker has full root privileges to the device, the spyware or agent is installed onto the target's device without them knowing. The fourth step is gather information. The spyware then runs in the background, collecting information and data from the device, such as the target's messages, emails, browsing history, location, and turning on the microphone. And the last step is exfiltration of the data. So the attackers are able to remotely control the installed spyware through their command and control servers. And then the attacker decides when to have all the collected data sent back to them from the device. So this is just a quick graphic that I pulled from Buying Spying. And again, I highly recommend going through that particular report because they do raise the concern about how these cyber spyware vendors are really something that we should be concerned about. And they go into details on certain actors that have put in place some of these exploits, and they then go into examples of people that were targeted from these exploits and how it affected their lives, their careers, and their well-being. So, in conclusion, I highly recommend reading both Google's published article and iVerify's published article about Coruna. And Google in particular goes into the technical detail of all the used exploits in this particular exploit chain and how it works exactly. It isn't understated that the framework surrounding the exploit kit is extremely well engineered. The exploit pieces are all connected naturally and combined together using common utility and exploitation frameworks. They dissect the kit and explain all the unique actions it performs from start to finish. And this episode is mainly just to bring the exploit in question to light and how it got out of hand. So hopefully we don't have to experience another WannaCry catastrophe, but from how it's looking, we most likely need to prepare for the worst. Appreciate you guys joining, and until next time.